Guys, welcome to the channel. The channel is Mr. Biscuit Speaks. Please like and share and subscribe and hit the notification bell and become a member, either an Insight member or an Epiphany member. Guys, this channel is dedicated to the searching of insights and epiphanies. We live by this standard. It is the wisdom of God to conceal a matter, the wisdom of kings to search it out. You don't have to believe in God to view this channel. I think that a belief in a higher being, and by higher being, I mean the result of any aspirational project, right? If you want to work out in the gym and your goal is to get a six-pack, you have to believe, you have to see that person with the six-pack in your mind in order to begin that aspirational project. So whatever that higher being is for you, guys, your responsibility to me is to get me there, and my responsibility to you is to help you get there. That's the family, right? That's the idea, at least. Join us for Animal Farm as well. We're in chapter 4, and that's going to begin probably right after I upload this video. That's happening today. Lots of cool things happening. Discord is actually happening in the future as well. So without further ado, chapter 3 of REN's 8 chapters. Let's take a look at
my weekly anxiety. My therapist was scowling at my weekly anxiety and depression scores like a detective trying to crack a particularly stubborn case. There were no signs of improvement, and the scores followed no real measurable pattern that were consistent with bipolar. After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all.
Guys, do you guys realize, I think, and let me know in the comments, what percentage of medicines are actually placebos? When I say placebo, I mean like the equivalent of sugar pills, right? A lot of people are getting better off of what essentially amounts to hope. I'm not exactly sure how placebos work, but they're very, very important in the medical industry, even to this day, where someone will give you something and then you'll take them and you'll just magically get better, even though what they prescribed you has nothing really to do with the ailment. And guys, the human body, I mean, with respect to the healthcare professional, the human body is the most complicated thing in the known universe. I mean, the human brain is like the complexity equivalent of like a Saturn V. Really, really complicated stuff that they're dealing with. But man, just guys, imagine every time you've been to the hospital. I don't know how old you are. I'm 38. The amount of times that you've been to the hospital and the amount of things you've been prescribed over your life, what percentage of that was actually dedicated to the problems that you were having? Guys, medical professionals are just human beings. It's just really intense to hear this part. I'm just going to rewind it just a little bit.
That he didn't think that I had enough medications to fill a pharmacy. He sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all. And it was a very odd thing to be stripped of an identity in an instant. The reality was that a 20-minute in and out consultation 2 years ago led to 2 years of swallowing pills that I never needed and devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had.
It's interesting because REN's life up until this point, I guess what they say about depression and the difference between depression and sadness is that depression is almost like and I've never struggled with depression. I've been sad for a long period of time. But the difference with sadness is that there's a reason you can point to. I'm sad because this happened. My mother passed a few years ago. I was sad for a long time. But the difference maybe between sadness and depression, and let me know, guys, if you struggle with any of this. The difference between sadness and depression might be that depression is like clouds rolling in for no reason that you can point to, right? There might be a reason buried somewhere. It might be, something that you're just kind of feeling, but and that may be the difference with sadness. With depression, it's just like, hey, there's just this fog. It's just difficult to wake up this morning. It's not necessarily a direct result of anything you can point at. And that's what makes depression so weighty, so heavy. You don't know when it's going to end because you don't know where it came from or what's responsible for it.
And devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had. The emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation, but I was also hopeful that this new path could offer me the relief that I desperately needed. He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but instinctively true to character, I started researching it online as soon as I got home. Apparently ME is the medical equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book, with tiredness as the only consistent plotline.
Wow.
There were no universally accepted reasons as to why the fuck it existed in the first place. It seemed it was largely accepted to be a post-viral condition, but that was all speculative because there were no clear consensus in the medical community what ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness that wouldn't go away with rest. I could relate to this. In fact, I could more than relate to it. For anyone lucky enough to have not have experienced this, if you want an idea of what it's like, force yourself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row. During this time, eat the food that makes you feel terrible, and in this sleep-deprived state, exercise until your muscles give out. By the 3rd day, you'll have a small insight into living with this condition. During the years post-stem cell transplant, where I recovered a lot of my health and functionality, I remember getting COVID and thinking it was a walk in the park compared to the first year of my illness. The difference was COVID lasted about a week. The thick of my illness lasted 8 years, and it only was getting worse. I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic.
Guys, you know what's so special about REN in this instance? Like having to go through that kind of exhaustion and fatigue and, and by fatigue, I guess, as opposed to exhaustion, I mean like muscle fatigue. And there's no way that kind of lifestyle for the average person doesn't well up inside you a big sense of compassion and empathy for those going through that. And so just a reminder that this path that he had to go through is probably what makes him so desperate to kind of lift all ships with his message, right? That, going through this pain was a direct channel and a direct avenue to the personality and music that he has.
I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic. It was a 6-month waiting list, God bless NHS wait times, but I felt excited to be surrounded by people who would understand me, where I could climb out of this nightmare. But my hopes were pretty quickly crushed during that first visit. I remember walking into a space that looked like a disused classroom where a bunch of people on chairs were sitting around in circles like Alcoholics Anonymous. I could feel a sense of camaraderie and that we all felt like dog shit. We were all confused and we were all desperately wanting to feel better. I believe at the time I was probably the youngest in the group. The group leader waddled in and handed us all a booklet that looked like a school timetable. She then sat us down and told about this new revolutionary technique called pacing, where you write down and track everything that you do in a day, and then you do it less. And then with time, do it more again. The theory being that you have a limited bucket of energy compared to normal people, and you need to protect that and gradually push it. I thought this sounded pretty stupid, so I raised my hand. I told her about the pain in my body. I told her that my muscles twitched constantly. I told her that my bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that.
And guys, one of the most difficult things, right? Like right now in my private research, I'm studying what's called relevance theory. I think I might have mentioned this in one of the previous videos. And in relevance theory, the primary question is, how do we say so little and yet understand so much? And so you go into like conversational implicature, where, if you say very little, then my mind wants to kind of connect the dots and kind of understand what you said or what you meant in spite of how little you said. Well, the reason that this relates right now is because REN, I think a part of his frustration during this portion of his life was exactly that he had so much feelings, not only as it pertained to emotions, but just his illness and the complexity of it. Imagine how isolating it must feel to not only have none of your friends or none of your family members really understand what you're going through, but then the medical community itself is confused. Right? So most of us, we pride ourselves on this ability we have to translate words into feelings. If I'm feeling a certain way, I can just manipulate my mouth, right? I have this vocal tract and I can make you understand what I feel. But imagine not having access to that. Imagine just being this, outsider with respect to, what the medical community thinks is going on. They have no clue what's going on, and you can't really express it, right? Like words are just not enough. A very, very interesting.
She just pointed at the booklet and she told me that I wanted to make the most. My bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that. She just pointed at the booklet and told me to follow it. I asked her about things like heavy metal poisoning, about chronically reactivating viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things.
See, and I think this exposes a little bit of Ren's brilliance because he understood. It's like, okay, well, the medical community is confused because not only am I not really able to express what it is I'm feeling, but whenever I do, they just kind of put me on another prescription, throw me in another group, and my condition stabilizes. And so with his own research, he's able to see what other people are experiencing, look at symptoms and say, okay, yes, that. It seems like it's that. For any of you guys that have like scoured the internet trying to like self-diagnose, you can understand how relieving it seems, even though you're not technically supposed to be doing that, right? You can understand how relieving it seems, like when you say, yes, that's exactly my problem. All of these symptoms match, and now I can take this to the medical community and have them finally help me. I love the way he tells this story.
Viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated, so much so that my legs buckled as I was walking home. I began to sob uncontrollably on the side of the road. An old woman knelt down to comfort me and asked me what was wrong. I didn't even really know how to explain, so I just told her that I missed my friend. Despite my skepticism, I stuck to the program for at least half a year, and I kept going for my periodic visits to the clinic, and it did jack shit. In fact, I got worse. I was always getting worse. One thing that particularly struck me about the ME support groups was the pure desperation and confusion. With most other conditions, you're given a diagnosis, a prognosis of whether it's going to kill you, and what you can do to manage it or cure it. With ME, you don't get that. You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out.
Guys, there is a song where Ren is in purgatory. This is a song that Ren did with, the name is escaping me right now. Try to find a way to raise the nectars in my pocket. You guys, if you guys know it, then put it in the comments, right? But Ren absolutely crushed his verse on that particular song, where they're kind of sitting in this bar, like surrounded by zombies. You guys know which one I'm talking about. I think Ren and the artist that featured Ren on that are in the midst of doing an entire project together. But I can't wait till that comes out because, I mean, that verse was from the heart. Now I understand the background of it.
You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out. There was no selection bias to the people suffering. Members of the group were anything from esteemed ex-lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say, these people were for the most part all extremely driven and collectively mourning their old lives. There's a stigma that because ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy. I can tell you firsthand that me and every single person I've met with genuine ME would rather run 1,000 marathons than have to live another week with the tiredness and the unrelenting fatigue. We were at war with our tiredness, trying desperately to escape it, and some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups.
You know what's fascinating? I don't know anything about ME other than what Ren has expressed so far. But it's interesting that he said that the majority of the people in those support groups were deeply driven prior to having this happen to them, and so it hit them with a very peculiar and pointed kind of pain, to be someone really really driven and then have this kind of immediate crash. But I also think that it's interesting that he said that the people with ME, at least that he's met, have had that commonality. And including himself. I mean, as a young person, he was just very like, I'm going to change the world, And so I don't know. It would be interesting to do research into whether the majority of the people who develop ME prior to having that were just like really, really driven, go-getter, seize the day kind of people.
Trying desperately to escape it. And some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me really intensely, as though he was studying every lyric coming out of my mouth. He approached me and asked me if the songs I was singing were mine. I said they were. A big smile was painted across his face, and he told me he just finished recording Plan B's latest record, which turned out to be The Defamation of Strickland Banks, one of my favourite albums of all time.
Wow.
He was looking for a new project to sink his teeth into, and he asked me if I'd come to London to record. We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes. So bit by bit, when I could, I'd get the train to London and start chipping away at my first ever album. I didn't really let on how I was feeling during this time because I didn't want to sabotage it. There would be times I'd finish up in the vocal booth after doing the take, excuse myself to go to the toilet, throw up from the dizziness I was experiencing, sometimes with specks of blood, and then I'd go back and pretend that nothing had happened. I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was fine. There was only so long that I was able to keep this up. Eric told me it'd be a cool idea for me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through.
So he identified with the rest of the people who had ME, not only because they were so exhausted and they were going through so much, but also because they were very driven. And look at the degree to which REN is driven. Like throughout the pain, throughout all of those things, he decides to keep going, even doing something which is not necessarily in keeping with somebody with ME. I mean, this kind of drive. I mean, imagine the kind of superstar. Not that REN was going for this kind of like superstardom and anything like that, but imagine with his talent, with his, octopus-like nature with music. He's great on the guitar, great on piano. He can sing, he can rap, and at an elite level with most of these things. Imagine where he would be if it weren't for the ME. And I know that he struggles with those thoughts as well. And you can hear about those kind of thoughts in high REN, but interesting to think about.
For me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through. The usual way it would go is I'd be in the back of Charlie's car, the whole world would be spinning, I'd be trying my best to sleep in it all day, parked up outside of whatever venue or pub it was in London, trying to conserve energy for the show. Sometimes I'd cry a little before I performed. My whole body would be burning. Then I'd brush it off and I'd get on stage and I'd perform as best I could. People would come up to me at the end, pat me on the back. I'd smile and pretend to be charismatic. Then I'd get back in the car and I wish I was in bed and have to endure a 3-hour drive back to Bath from London. There was only a few shows where I could keep pretending. I'd usually be trying to disguise the fact that my body was trembling through the fatigue and pain. Eventually I started crying mid-set. It became blindingly obvious to everyone working with me during that time that something was very wrong. I told Eric that I needed to take some time out. My plan was to live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record. That 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months. I'd pushed myself to total burnout. The distance led to me and that angel breaking up, in part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud.
Once again, guys, that's another component of the isolation that's involved. And And how do you do that? And maybe that's a conversation that we can have in the comments or on the Discord server. I don't know whether or not the Discord server will be fully up and running by the time that this drops, but that's a conversation that I want to have, is how to have sympathy and compassion for people who cannot express what's going on internally. Because none of us can. Maybe that's the place to start. Words are inadequate to express what I'm feeling right now. And I'm very calm, right? But the last time I was calm, the set of circumstances in my life might have been entirely different. So what exactly do I mean by calm? Even something like that, right? So when people are expressing their deepest pains and emotions, it's very easy to want to isolate, because it's like, I don't know what's going on with you. You can't seem to express it. But man, I don't know. And maybe another component is just the ability to sit silently with people. I love, by the way, that, when he was mentioning, as he was walking home one day, he sat on the ground and started crying, and an old lady approached him and asked him what was wrong. It's like, sometimes it's just being present for somebody and not necessarily needing them to explain what's actually happening. But guys, there's consequences to something like ME, something that, people don't understand. My wife has seasonal depression as well. And for me, who's never experienced depression, like sometimes I'm tempted to just be like, what's going on? What's your problem? Like, why can't you? I mean, look, the day it's beautiful. It's sunshine. It's all this stuff. And it's taken me some time, as someone who's been, married for a while now. It's even taken me some time to understand this isn't your fault. This is nobody's fault. She's not pointing the finger at anybody. But I don't know. I love this.
In part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline. I lost the record deal and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really called to check up on me. It felt like the whole world was moving at lightning speed without me. I had this amazing opportunity right in front of me, and I was chained to the floor. I was alone. I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me, but it wouldn't, and it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn, and I would rot.
Guys, here's something to think about, right? A lot of people, when they see REN, when they see how much love and how much fanfare and how much praise and that he gets, a lot of people immediately think that they would like to kind of to wear his shoes or to be in his position. Guys, be very, very careful what you wish for, right? There's been so many songs released, and a lot of them I did last time I was at my man Black Pegasus's house. Subscribe to Black P if you haven't. Shout out to you, Black Pegasus, 500,000 subs. You're the man. But last time I was at Black Pegasus' house, we were just talking about, it's like, man, so many of these musicians that we react to are making songs about how difficult it is being them, right? REN talks about the sword of Damocles a lot, right? And, we all know, the sword of Damocles is like heavy as the head that wears the crown. You will look up and you could be sliced by this sword. But, anyway, that's, just something interesting.
Me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn, and I would rot.
I'm going to go back just a little bit, guys.
I was alone. I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me, but it wouldn't, and it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn, and I would rot. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man.
Jesus Christ.
Stay tuned for that.
I like that he starts laughing at the end. Hang on. There was something that he said. Yeah, the world would go on without me and just let me rot in bed. Guys, that's the difference between pain and suffering, right? Pain is when you feel this sharp pinch. It's something in your body. It's something in your physical body, right? But suffering requires metacognition. It requires the tendency to think about your thoughts, right? Or to have self-awareness. Suffering is always self-aware. It's this thought, not only of the pain, but it's like, As a result of this pain, I won't become this. As a result of this, I won't be able to do that. It's an abandonment of the present, right? It's not necessarily a flaw. I mean, your ability to, your tendency to sacrifice depends on this relationship with the future. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but I mean, man, can it get you into a lot of trouble. We talk about this a lot in the Tool reactions. Look at, Ride in 2 and Humble River, those reactions. But
my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
Patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter, running water. It's the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't want to talk about my father, I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell, I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in myself. I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden? The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that that time never really existed. I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind declined it. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression.
Guys, I'm sorry. I just had to listen. I'm gonna go back. I just had to listen to that. I couldn't, Now on second listen of this part, the first thing that I hear, and maybe this is the beginning. I'm not sure exactly how old this is, but whenever he does these, he's ushering in the spirit of his confession. Whatever it is he's about to say in the song is ushered in by the mood that he brings in with it. And this, you hear how his voice is cracking, how he sounds sick in it. I think that's intentional. Listen to that. It's like somebody crooning from a deathbed, right?
My thought patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter.
My thoughts are composed by a time bomb for an author. And the first thing said depression, right? And so maybe he's trying to describe depression. This certainly seems to describe how it's visited upon the people who I love who have depression. A time bomb for an author, meaning no one knows when this is going to settle in. No one knows when the depression is coming. You don't know if tomorrow you're just going to have a tough time getting out of bed. You don't know how long it's going to last after it detonates, how much it's going to destroy, who you'll be on the other side. It's just, that's a brilliantly poetic line.
Patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter, running water. It's the state that I wish to become.
Running water is the state that I wish to become. And running water is something I think of as perpetually taking the shape of its environment. Like when you pour running water into a jar, it takes the shape of the jar. But running water might just be being okay with change, right? And a lot of times in states of depression, there's a lot of attachment and there's a lot of resistment. There's a lot of resisting.
It's getting shorter, running water. It's the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater.
For any of you who struggle with depression, I would recommend steel manning, right? Instead of giving advice, he's talking about how advice doesn't help, right? When people without depression try to give advice to people with depression, we're not taking on, we are failing in our job of perspectival knowing, right? We're treating the depressed person as if they don't really have depression. Oh, just look on the bright side. Oh yeah, just be happier. All you have to do to solve this problem is, X and Y. And that's deeply offensive to someone who has this kind of problem. One of the best things that I've learned in my relationship with those who have depression is the art of steel manning. And steel manning is when you repeat what you think they're trying to say in different words. And all that accomplishes is making them feel felt and seen. So when someone says, oh, I'm going through this, and I'm just, just taking that, absorbing that, and then repeating back to them what you heard them say in different words. It's a brilliant thing. Because if I can say to you what you just said to me in different words, that means I've completely taken in what you're trying to express. And it's a brilliant thing. And I know it seems trivial. Just try it.
Tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't want to talk about my father, I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself, I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help.
I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never helps. That must be a really painful part of the process, guys. Like when you're going from therapist to therapist, is watching them all try the same methods that the last one tried. It's difficult to imagine.
But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell. I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in myself. I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden? The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that that time never really existed.
Very, very powerful realization, right? Guys, everything has always been the same. I say sometimes this channel is dedicated to insights. What does insight mean? Look at the etymology of that word. Insight. It was always there. Nothing has changed. You've just stopped ignoring something you were ignoring the whole time. That's what an insight is. That's the reason you go, oh, when you get an insight. You're like, oh, it's an aha moment, right? Aha, meaning, this was right under my nose and I just didn't catch it. It was a puzzle piece that was always right there on this table. I just didn't know that this puzzle piece fit in right here, right? Yeah, the golden era never existed. It's not only did the golden era not exist, but the bad era, the dark time. It's just what you're foregrounding and backgrounding.
Where you were carefree and everything was golden. The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that that time never really existed.
Wow.
I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind declined it. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression, I hate you, depression. Your constant oppression, respond with aggression. They say depression brings you lessons. Constant stressing conceals blessings. You will grow in broken settings. Fuck those lessons, fuck depression. I've been living in your shadow for so long that I forgot how I can shine. How I can find a refuge in my mind. How am I meant to sit here and unwind? The planets align. I feel like I'm cursed. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to hurt. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to bleed. But my demons been feeling this way since birth. Depression, I hate you. 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 Depression, I hate you.
Guys, he says that he's been feeling this way since birth. A lot. And isn't it fascinating that when you, and you know, I'll just put it to C.S. Lewis. There's a C.S. Lewis quote in his book, The Great Divorce, which we should definitely read in the book club. I am adding that right now, The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, same writer of Chronicles of Narnia. But in the book, The Great Divorce, he says something like this, and I'm paraphrasing. It's not a direct quote. But those who are in hell think that they've been there the entire time. They see everything in their lives as having led up to hell. And those who are in heaven see their entire lives as having led them to heaven. Guys, when you are in a cognitively limited state, you will look back and only see the bad parts. It's very difficult to notice. Do you ever notice when you're arguing with someone, when you're having a fight with someone that you love, especially, you'll say, oh, well, you always do this, and you always do that. You never let me, all these prefixes, always and never, right? Where it's like we're choosing to forget the reason that we're married, and we're choosing to forget the reason that we made this decision to be best friends, or to be, forgetting that we grew up together, type of thing. Because when you're in hell, all you remember are the things which led you there. And when you're in heaven, similarly, right? When you're in heaven, when you're having the greatest time of your life, and you look back, you're just like, yeah, everything, all of these components were right in alignment to get me to this place. Wow, what a phenomenal video. I'm anxious for chapter 4. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. Guys, sign up to Animal Farm. Like the video, subscribe, become a member to some degree, whether it's an Insight member or Epiphany member. Join the Discord. Hit the notification bell. All of the little dinkity dinks, do all of those, right? If you support the channel, I appreciate it. And also comment, correspond with me in the comments, and I will try to correspond with you as well. Love you guys. Appreciate it.